Mr. Ibrahim Thaiw, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, welcome to Al-Arabiya, sir.
Thank you.
I'd like to start to ask you a very simple question. What is desertification and what causes it?
Desertification is when human activities disturb nature in arid, semi-arid lands. Essentially, we as human beings, our activities are contributing to degrading systems that had been there for millennia. And when you do that in a region that is arid or semi-arid, therefore much more vulnerable, you disturb the entire system. So what is called ecosystems is actually disturbed. So it's about land and water. This convention, the Convention to Combat Desertification, Drought and Desertification, is one of the Rio Conventions and is absolutely critical to humanity.
Is desertification something new in our world, or has been going for a long while?
Desertification is not a new phenomenon. What is new is that we as human beings, we are more and more present. Our activities are basically much more present right now than they were before. As you know, the population keeps growing, but the demand of humanity on the planet also keeps growing because of our consumption patterns. And therefore, it is not a new phenomenon, but it has accelerated over the last few years due to two phenomena. One is human activities, and the other one is basically the changing conditions of climate.
Where do we see the most clear examples of desertification in our world nowadays?
Clearly in the Sahara. The Sahara Desert, which is not new as an ecosystem, but in the fringes of the Sahara, you see that lands that were previously well protected, well covered, that are now being transformed into new deserts. But it is not a phenomenon that is unique to the Sahara. We know it in other parts of the world, like in Southern Africa, or in Asia, or in Latin America.
Or China even.
In China. China has actually large deserts, both in Mongolia and also in the Xinjiang province. Yeah.
The Sahara covers about a third of Africa and is about the size of the entire of the United States. And it's the largest in the world, I understand. One of the proposals to mitigate the effects of the climate change on the Sahara is to install large scale of wind and solar farms. Do you see this as a possibility, and what is needed to start this process?
There are very good news in the world sometimes, and one of them is actually renewable energy. With the climate change, we know that the Paris Agreement says that we have to reduce our emissions. And one way of reducing our emissions is to produce clean energy. Clearly, with the Sahara and all arid lands, you have wonderful opportunities to actually generate renewable energy through solar energy, but also wind energy. By planting more solar panels and having a more efficient system, you can produce energy not only for the needs of our communities in terms of lighting and so forth, but you can actually industrialize regions that today are in the dark. You can reduce the food loss of many parts of the world where they cannot conserve their food today.
The Sahara thousands of years ago, like the Al-Khali, the empty quarter in Saudi Arabia, was green. It was full of forests and lakes, etc. Is it possible to make the Sahara or the Al-Khali green again?
Technically, yes, it is possible because we have conditions, we have the technology right now to do it. But we also have to consider the fact that the population has changed from the times that you were talking. So it is the human activities that are contributing to degrading land. We know today that there are 2 billion hectares of land that can be restored. And the good news is that when you undertake that activity, you will create jobs. So it will reduce the unemployment that we know in many parts of the world. But the other good news is that as you restore the land, you will create opportunities for food production or for grazing activities or for inland fisheries. So therefore, you are building the resilience of these communities.
Do you fear wars over water? And do you fear displacement of people because of desertification?
Yes, I do. Wars over water are there already. When I say land and water, when farmers and pastoralists are fighting over access to land and water,
I mean big-scale wars between nations.
I'm coming.
Yes.
I'm coming. It starts small. It's like a cancer.
Yes.
You don't see it spreading. It's, you know, it's until it metastasizes. So it is very important to understand that land degradation does not come as a wave. It's not like fire. It starts in small bits and pieces.
Slow process. Yeah.
Slow process. But by the time it's like the non-communicable diseases, by the time you realize it's there, it's already too late. So it is important to recognize that that phenomena. Now, wars over access to land and water are possible. We have seen, unfortunately, in the past some conflicts, including in my own country, with
Mauritania,
neighboring Senegal,
yeah,
where in 1989 there was, not a conflict, but there was a major disruption of the diplomatic relations, and with movements of people here and there. So it is something that we should be very careful about. We know that access to river basins is a major phenomenon. We know that dams are being built in some parts of the world where other parts of the world are considering this as an act of war. So it is certainly something that we have to pay attention
and
to.
displacement.
Displacement now, many people migrate not because they want to migrate, but they migrate because they have no choice. It's like it's forced movements. What does a young person of Haiti have to do when 99% of the ecosystems are degraded, and when the hills are completely naked, and there's no opportunity for them to produce food anymore? What is left to them to do but to flee? The same happens in many other parts of the world. So millions of people have been moving from rural areas to cities, from their countries to neighboring countries, and now you see movements further afield. And most of the forced migrations due to climate change, due to land degradation, are actually going to greener pastures.
What can you tell us about the Great Green Wall initiative, and how far did we go along with that?
Now, the African Union has decided to establish a Great Green Wall program, which covers 12 countries of Africa, from the Atlantic coast in Senegal to the Indian Ocean in Djibouti. It's a wonderful program, 8,000 kilometers. Some people call it potentially the eighth wonder of the world, the eighth world wonder. It will take time. It will not be in my generation, but one time will come when people would realize that this was a wonderful idea.
By the year 2030, some people estimate there will be about 8.6 billion person on our globe. Will they all have access to clean drinking water?
We hope to. It is one of the ambitions of the Sustainable Development Goals. The situation has improved a lot from the Millennium Development Goals. I think we should be very proud of the success that has been achieved so far. But unfortunately, there is still a gap. There is still a gap in terms of access to clean water. But there is even a bigger gap in terms of sanitation. Still, many people are suffering from from lack of sanitation.
Yeah.
Still, now, if you drink clean water, and at the same time you don't know what to do with the dirty water, it comes back to your plate, because it goes to rivers and lakes, yes, untreated. It goes to coastal areas. It comes back to your plate as fish, and therefore it can contaminate and create more disease again.
When you go in September for the COP14, what are the most important issues are you taking with you? What are your priorities for this convention in India?
One of the most important topics that we would like to discuss there, especially at the high-level segment 9 and 10 of September, is the connections between land, climate, and energy that we mentioned earlier on. Critical, very critical, because there are solutions. And that we hope will contribute to the Climate Action Summit that Secretary General will be hosting here on 23rd of September, i.e. 10 days later. The other aspect that we think is important is to look at the connections between rural and urban communities, the interconnection that is there. Cities are being fed by rural areas, but this is not recognized properly. But we would like to have discussions, including on land stewardships, working with faith-based organizations, because we have to mobilize everybody. Now, most of the faiths that are in the world recognize the importance of land, the importance of nature, and the importance of conserving and protecting the planet. So we would like to work with all of them. This COP will be very important also because it is hosted by India. India is one of the most active countries in terms of land degradation.
And one of the big polluters as well.
Indeed. But it is very important to recognize that it is a country that is affected. It is not in the Sahara, it is not in the Kalahari, but it is affected by land degradation. And they want to have an action. We understand that they are working on a legacy program so that after the conference of the parties, they can have actually activities on the ground. But we do hope that many countries not only will come to the COP and have real discussion and real decisions that would influence the rest of the world, but we also hope that action will be taken much more visibly right now. It is not about nature only, it is not about the beauty of nature, it is about us as humanity, because we are the ones that will be suffering. And us, meaning the poorest communities, the most vulnerable communities, are the ones that are bearing the brunt.
Ibrahim Thaiw, Executive Secretary for the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. We thank you for all this information and for this interview, and we wish you the very, very best of luck in combating desertification and improving our environment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.